All right, everyone. So today is the start of Unit 7 over rational numbers. So I'm really excited about this unit. Once again, this is some really awesome real-world math that's really going to take the different things that we do, the different calculations we do to the next level. The title of this lesson is Positive and Negative Numbers. So we have 3 learning targets. Number 1, I can use positive and negative numbers to describe temperature and elevation. So those are going to be the 2 kind of contexts that we'll be talking about negative numbers in today. I can explain what 0 positive numbers and negative numbers mean in the context. Once again, there's that word context of temperature and elevation. And third, I know what positive and negative numbers are. So, our first activity is a Notice and Wonder chart on 2 different cities. We have Memphis and Bangor. So if you want to pause the video right now to fill out your Notice and Wonder chart, go ahead and do that now. All right, and so here are some of the notices and wonders that I had or predicted that some of you would have. So for my notices, we can see that the temperature is being shown in these 2 different cities. Each city has 2 temperatures, and looking closely, I can see that it's 5 p.m. on Saturday here and 6 p.m. on Saturday in Bangor. Okay. And the wonders, why does each city have 2 temperatures, and why is there a minus sign in front of 17? Okay. I'm sure some of you know the answers to those questions. So, we've talked about this before. America is a really kind of weird country in that everything we measure, we have to do our own way, right? Like other countries in the world do not use inches, they do not use feet, they do not use pounds, and they do not use degrees Fahrenheit. That is all just America being different and choosing their own way to measure things. So when we look at temperature, we typically look at things in Fahrenheit. The rest of the world uses something called Celsius, okay? And that's what that C represents. So Celsius is, in a lot of ways, a little bit better because Celsius talks about everything in relation to when water freezes. So in Fahrenheit, water freezes or it begins to snow at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which kind of seems like a random number. For Celsius, you know water's going to freeze when it's 0, which makes more sense, kind of. So the reason why this is negative, so that means this is below the point when it would start to snow. So it's pretty cold here. When you see a negative degree, that's a sign that it's probably pretty cold. So let's start and try and putting this knowledge to use. So on the next page, it's called Above and Below 0. Here are 3 situations involving changes in temperature, and there are also 3 number lines. Represent each change on a number line, then answer the question. So, number 1. At noon, the temperature was 5 degrees Celsius. By late afternoon, it had risen 6 degrees Celsius. Okay, so as mathematicians, I know you guys don't have the paper copy in front of you. I'm going to go ahead and oops, sorry, wrong problem. I'm going to go ahead and annotate my text. It risen 6 degrees Celsius. I'm going to underline the word risen. Okay, and then the question, what was the temperature in the late afternoon? So I'm going to go down to my first number line here. And it says at noon, the temperature was 5 degrees Celsius. So imagine that this is a thermometer. 5 is warmer than 0, and it's 5 units up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means it was, here is my 5 degrees Celsius. And then it says it has risen 6 degrees. So risen means to go up or to add. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 6 more than 5 is 11. Okay, so that's a really simple one, right? 5 degrees, it rises 6 degrees, it would be 11 degrees Celsius then at that time. Okay, now let's look at number 2. Number 2, I had already annotated. The temperature was 8 degrees Celsius at midnight. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that now. So 8 degrees, 8 is warmer than 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's my 8 degrees Celsius. And by dawn, it has dropped 12 degrees Celsius. So what was the temperature at dawn? So once again, if risen means to go up or to add, to drop means to go down or subtract. So I'm starting at 8, and then it's going to drop 12. So I know that from 8 to 0 is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so that's that drop. There's 12 spaces in between. What temperature is that? Okay, so if I'm at 0, and now I'm going down, this would be -1, -2, -3, -4 degrees Celsius. So 8 degrees minus 12 degrees is -4 degrees Celsius. So that means 4 degrees below 0. So anytime you see a negative number when you're talking about temperature, that means how many degrees it is below freezing. And in the context of Celsius, freezing is 0. So this, I had to go 4 marks below 0. And so we count just like we do positively, -1, -2, -3, -4. All right, and now for number 3. Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, which I had already mentioned. But the freezing temperature can be lowered by adding salt to the water. That's the reason why we salt the roads in the winter. A student discovered that adding half a cup of salt to a gallon of water lowers, so once again, lowers, goes down, its freezing temperature by 7 degrees Celsius. So what is the freezing temperature of the gallon of salt water? So now we're starting at 0, which is our normal freezing point of water, and we added this salt, which makes it freeze at a lower temperature, and they said it lowers it by 7 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that would be -7 degrees. So 0 minus 7 is -7. So once again, when we go past 0 in the negatives, we count just like we do going up. -1, 1 less than 0, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7. And so once again, how I mentioned, that's why we salt the roads in the winter, right? So ice is really, really dangerous to drive on. So if you put salt on the road, instead of water freezing at 0, so for us it would be 32 because we talk about Fahrenheit, it would have to be a lot colder for it to turn to ice if you add salt to it. So it'll stay at water at the temperature where it would normally freeze. It will stay water because it needs to be even colder for it to freeze. That's kind of how salt works. If you have a bigger follow-up question on that, Mr. Munson would be your guy. So, how should you name the resulting temperature in each situation? That's kind of what we did up there. We can add if the temperature is below freezing, in this context, because we're talking about Celsius, that's 0 degrees, we add a negative symbol, okay, which is like a minus in front of a number. So what does it mean when the temperature is above 0 or below 0? So above 0 means number is positive. And if we're talking about freezing, then above 0 means the number is positive and no ice or snow. because it's above freezing. No ice or no snow. And so what does it mean if it's below 0? Then below 0 means negative. And that water will freeze. Okay. And the final question, do numbers less than 0 make sense in other contexts? Give some examples to show how they do or do not make sense. Okay, so we know from the beginning of the lesson we're going to talk about elevation, which is how high or low a landmass is. So, mountains are positive. They are above sea level. They are above the oceans. Valleys, like the Grand Canyon, are negative. They're actually like holes or dips in the landmass of the country that are actually below the ocean level. Another really common way we talk about negative numbers is currency. It's just a fancy word for money. If you have money, if you have $5, then it's positive. If you are in debt, negative. Let's say you spent all of your money, you had no money, and then you asked a friend to let you borrow $5, but you have to pay them back, then you have negative $5 because you have no money, and not only do you have no money, but you owe someone money, so you have negative money. All right, and we'll learn more about that in the coming lessons. So with that, make sure you have all these notes down, and then we'll move on to the next section.